everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We're so excited to have you for this event. My name is Yasmina Nolan, and I would like to introduce our distinguished speakers for the night. We will be having Twan Stevenson Woods. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do really quick?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Twan Stevenson Woods, and I am the Director of Housing Services for Housing Up. So I have a staff of 3, and we are housing coordinators. And our primary job is to locate landlords who are, I hate to say the word willing, because we know in DC, you cannot discriminate against a housing voucher or subsidy. But so we do try to find landlords who are mostly willing to give clients second chances, because those are the clients that we deal with who need second chances. And we have been very successful in doing that. And we work with clients who are in rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, and we also have a HUD grant that we work with where clients are youth, veterans, and we also have a transitional youth program that we just started. So here at Housing Up, we do a little bit of everything, and with the housing department, we pretty much touch every department that we work with.
Thank you so much for that introduction. We are really excited to hear what you have to say. Next up, we have Jesse Rabinowitz, the Advocacy and Campaign Manager for the Way Home campaign at Miriam's Kitchen. If you would like to give us a little introduction and tell us a little bit about the work that you do.
Sure, thanks so much for having me. I work over at Miriam's Kitchen. Miriam's Kitchen has been around for 37 years, working to end long-term homelessness through meals, housing, outreach, art therapy, housing, and advocacy. And I manage the Way Home campaign, which brings together about 105 organizations, including Housing Up, and about 6,000 individuals to advocate to Mayor Bowser and the DC Council to invest what is needed to end homelessness. We really believe that housing is the solution to homelessness. And we believe that DC can and should be doing more to invest in the housing solutions needed to make sure that all of our neighbors have the housing they need to thrive.
Thank you so much. Can't wait to hear more. And originally, we planned for AU Professor Jessica Owens-Young to be a panelist. Unfortunately, her spouse is sick and her attention needs to be with them right now. So we wish them a speedy recovery. And instead, we're so excited to welcome Janelle Miller, who's a therapist at Housing Up, and she will be our third panelist tonight. So Janelle, would you like to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about the work that you do?
Hi, everyone. I'm actually a case manager at Housing. So I work with families, and my pretty much entails assisting my clients to maintain stable housing. That can be through connecting them with mental health providers, physical doctors, community resources for rental assistance, for food. Pretty much, based on what the family needs are, then I'll connect them to the resources that's available either at Housing Up or in the community.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Janelle Miller, therapist or case manager, not therapist at Housing Up. And thank you so much for joining us last minute. And I will turn it over to Dylan for a minute.
Hey everyone, I want to thank you all for joining us again. And thank you for Janelle for joining us last minute. I'm excited to get to the questions.
All right, I think that's on me, and we can go ahead and start the moderated panel. Actually, first I'd like to start off. Are there any questions for any of the panelists before we begin from the rest of the audience before we have our guided discussion? If so, you can raise your hand and I can take you off mute, or you can unmute yourself. We will also have a couple of minutes towards the end if you guys have any questions as the discussion carries on. But for now, I can start with the first question for Jesse. And so I would like to ask, what is a housing first approach to ending homelessness and how does it work?
Great question. Yeah. So housing first is this idea that everyone deserves housing. And I think it's helpful to contrast it to the housing last approach, which we used to use in the country, but thankfully has fallen out of favor. A housing last approach means that before you can get housing, you need to be sober, take in your meds, go into your doctor's appointments, be in therapy, be looking for a job, kind of doing all of this stuff that, like, frankly, most of us wouldn't meet those qualifications. And the housing first approach flips it on its head and says that by virtue of being human, you deserve a house. And after you get that house, the likelihood that you're able to meet your other needs, whatever those might be, is higher after you get into housing. So as the name suggests, housing comes first and everything else follows. And it works really well in DC. We know at Miriam's Kitchen that about 95% of people housed through a housing first program stay housed after their first year. So it's remarkably successful, and it's a more human-centered, client-centered approach to getting people into housing and helping them meet their goals.
Awesome. Thank you for that explanation. Also, if any of the other panelists would like to chime in on any of these questions, whether or not they were specifically directed towards you, please feel free. Thank you so much, Jesse, for that first question. And the next question is for Tuan, and I would ask, how does the current DC housing and rental market contribute to homelessness and eviction, especially in the time of this pandemic?
I am talking and I am muted. Okay. So in DC, we have found that the majority of our homelessness is minorities, and that comes with income. Because of the income, the gap in the income between the minorities and our people who are able to pay the rent in DC, this is causing a systemic area of homelessness. So I would first say income, and then I would say the gentrification, because people are not able to sustain the income to pay for the places that they probably were raised, born and raised, and parents probably have taken out a second mortgage just to make things work over the years. The kids, grandkids, whoever get left with that mortgage, or it may even be where they're not even paying the property tax on the property. So we know with that, then with the low income not being able to meet the market rent, what we're asking for in DC, that's a large issue, along with what I would say contribute to the homelessness is our rent control. So, you know, back in the 70s, and I think it's changed maybe in 85, the law for the rent control, but landlords still have that gap where they can raise the rent from 2 to 10%. And I want to say I read maybe about a week or so ago where they, the law, I think, was supposed to change December of this year. And I want to say that they extended the law for rent control, but the landlords, and I don't know if it's because of the pandemic we're in, but the landlords cannot go over that 2%. But we'll see what happens after December 31st, 2020. But I will definitely say income is the largest reason that we're having the number of homelessness that we have in DC.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And for the third question, Janelle, if you would like to answer, what are the social or psychological effects that a family experiences when recovering from housing instability?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah, of course. The question was, what are the social or psychological effects that a family experiences when recovering from housing instability, and kind of how does this show up? How do you see it in your work?
I think one of the first psychological impact will be the stress that they experience. It is very stressful experiencing housing instability. This in turns impact the children's ability to go to school, the parents' ability to effectively care for them. And also, if the parent has a physical health symptom or a diagnosis, this stress exacerbates that physical health. Also, if they have a mental health diagnosis, that also exacerbate the situation. Being able to effectively coordinate with your mental health provider, take your medication, that contributes to their psychological health as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And so the fourth question for Jesse, what are the economic effects, short and long term, that a family suffers when they are evicted?
Yeah, I think first maybe just naming that in addition to the cost to the family, there are costs to us as a society. Both, I think, morally, it's morally unacceptable that we live in a city with a budget of $15 billion, but yet we allow about 7,000 households to experience homelessness every night. On a more fiscal or money-oriented scale, homelessness is really expensive. It costs about $20,000, $27,000 a year to keep someone in permanent supportive housing. But research in DC and across the country show that it costs $40,000 to keep someone homeless. So paying for all of their frequent trips to the emergency room, use of shelters, meal programs, things like that. So we could actually save money by ending homelessness, which we should do even if it doesn't save money. But it's not, I think it's important to remember that DC is spending more money to keep people homeless than we are to end homelessness. For a family or an individual on the personal basis, homelessness is incredibly expensive. People, having to constantly replace items, documents, things. There's a real inability to save money, which I think speaks more broadly to how, as a country, we view poverty and how we treat poor people, right? Like if you're poor, you can't, and you're on government benefits, you can't have more than a certain amount of money in savings, which is often $2,000. So we actually are telling people to save money so they can get a house. But we're literally saying that if you have too much money, we're going to kick you out of housing or kick you off of your programs. So I think that as a society, we've made it incredibly expensive to be poor. And I think that is even more true for people living outside.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jesse. And the next question for Tuan is, what are the biggest challenges to maintaining housing stability for a family who has overcome an episode of homelessness?
So I have to go back to saying this again, and I just have to start with income. Income is a large factor in homelessness in DC, and we have programs where we want to help sustain income and help get our tenants and our clients educated. And as Jesse said, teach them how to have a budget, teach them how to save money. But that's almost impossible, because if you are in a certain income bracket, you will not qualify for these programs. Although we know that housing, the ratio of what the landlords are charging for housing, the income does not compensate for that. And we have a program, and I can't say it does not work, it works, but we have the rapid rehousing program where it's supposed to be for 12 months. Me, myself, if I just happens to lose my job, thank God for Housing Up right now, but if something happened and I just happened to lose my job, I just don't think I can bounce back within 12 months. And I think that's another problem that we're having. It's called rapid rehousing, where the clients are rapidly moving into these programs, but actually, to me, the rapid is is rapidly going in a circle where, you know, you have clients who are in that program after 12 months, even if they exit successfully, they've gone through the program, you know, meet with the case managers, do everything they're supposed to do, but who's to say that you still have income to sustain housing in your family? So again, I just have to say income, and maybe we need to take a second look at some of the programs that we do provide in the city and extend the months on these programs just to help these clients or these tenants to become sustainable.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tuan, for that explanation. And the next question, again for Jesse, how has DC's ability to build affordable housing impacted the level of homelessness and eviction in the city?
That's a good question. So I think most folks know that last year a report came out that said DC has the highest level of gentrification in the country. And I think that has changed over the past year. We've dropped to, I think, number 11 over in the past year, but that shouldn't give us any comfort, right? We still are forcibly displacing Black and brown people who built the city and have made it where all of us want to live, and are pushing them out because the average cost to rent a one bedroom here ranges between $1,800 and $2,000 a month, which you just can't. It's just too expensive, right? It's fundamentally too expensive to live here. So while DC has made some progress in investing into low-income housing and ending homelessness, we're not even keeping pace, right? We're still not building enough housing. We're not housing enough people to have it be a net neutral, which is why we see every year, despite the investments we make into ending homelessness and into housing, the numbers are not going down in correlation to the investments. And I think that we need to fundamentally look as a city, and you know, a lot of our elected officials say housing is a human right, and we need to not let people get off with saying that but not backing it up with commitments. Housing is a human right means that housing is a fundamental right that everyone has, regardless of if landlords can make money off it or not, right? People deserve housing, full stop, period. And I think we also have to hold a few things at the same time. It's true that the Bowser administration has invested more money in ending homelessness or in low-income housing than other administrations in the past. That is true, right? So every year, the Bowser administration has reliably invested $100 million in the Housing Production Trust Fund, which is DC's main mechanism for building low-income housing. That is true. And also, when we look at what the actual need is, we're talking billions of dollars. So investing $100 million is giving people crumbs, is giving people pennies and saying, you should be grateful for these pennies that I'm giving you. But in reality, we need whole-scale change. And I keep going back to this. DC has a budget of $15 billion, $15.5 billion. If we wanted to, we could be investing a lot more in housing and ending homelessness, and we're not. And it's a choice that the mayor and every DC council member makes every time they work on the budget. And they're choosing to prioritize things like police, which we know do not keep us safe, over things like housing, which we know keeps people safe, keeps communities safe, and ends homelessness. So the need is huge, and throwing half measures at it simply isn't going to get us to where we need to be.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That explanation was very helpful. And our last question is for all of you guys. If you'd each like to take just a couple of minutes to just give your thoughts or response. The question is, how has COVID-19 impacted the underserved families, those experiencing an episode of homelessness or eviction, and the DC housing market in general? Tuan, would you mind going first?
Sure.
Thank you.
Actually, I was going to say we have, with our clients, we are experiencing a lot of DV, domestic violence, within a home. And I can only, because I'm not a case manager, so I'm not always in a close proximity with the clients, but I can also only imagine child abuse as well. We have parents who are I'm going to start with the child abuse or neglect. We have parents who are not usually at home with their kids as much as they are now while we're in the pandemic. So I have heard of cases of child protection having to be called on several occasions. And me, myself, being that I am in the close proximity of the clients when it comes to the parents and them having to be rehoused, we are experiencing a large volume of domestic violence. We just have parents that are home, the mom, the father, boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever it is, they're at home all day, and we're not able to move about as we used to, right? So we're having people to find out their living situation is not as pretty as you probably thought it was. And, it's different personalities. You have different personalities living in a home together. Me, myself, I've been married for 25 years. And, during this pandemic, my husband is a teacher and this is what I do. It's been pretty hard, to be in the house all day. And, you're kind of like bumping around together. You're just doing things, bumping into each other, maybe say some things that you don't mean. You can't take it back. So I just think that domestic violence has been one of the largest things that we have experienced in this pandemic. And then I was also reading that there was a landlord, I want to say it was up on 16th Street, where after the pandemic, one of his tenants lost their job. And that tenant had someone staying with them, was surfing or something. And the landlord wanted that tenant out. Well, in DC, there's a process that we have to go to for eviction. So this landlord went as far as reporting a robbery in the building to get the tenant out. The tenant, took it to landlord tenant court or whatever. And the tenant was, the judge, signed for the tenant to come back to the apartment. But that's the thing, it's like now everyone is desperate, and we say that landlords, they're out to help our community. They're out, to serve our homeless community. But at the end of the day, we also know that it is also a moneymaker for them. And to go as far as reporting a robbery in your building that didn't happen, and this person who reported this, was an ill person. And for you to go as far as reporting a robbery in your building, and to put someone on the streets, that's another problem that we're having, where landlords are wrongfully evicting during this time of the pandemic.
Yeah, what an upsetting reality, but it is the reality. Thank you so much for that explanation. Janelle, would you like to comment next?
Sure. I think what I was seeing mostly with my client is food insecurities. The families that I work with, their children typically qualify for free lunches at school, and they're typically being served lunch and breakfast. So the first part of the CARES bill covered additional SNAP benefits, and now that is ended. So some of my clients, they're stuck feeding their children. And I typically have large families on my caseload. So they're stuck feeding their children on their limited income. And that's creating a lot of food insecurities. So I'm mainly connecting my clients to food pantries and other means of getting food for their family. Another thing will be around their mental health for themselves and also their children. And when virtual learning started, we recognized that technology divide, because some schools were not giving out tablets or Chromebooks like they were supposed to, and even internet access. That was a problem on my caseload. And the teachers report that to CFSA, and this is through no fault of the parent. And so some of my clients, they did have that report filed by the teachers, which I think is really counterproductive, because if you do not have the means of providing the Chromebook, you should not be held accountable, which is causing, additional stress on the parents. Just helping the children to do schoolwork, sometimes stuff that they don't even understand themselves. It's also been a barrier, and it's been stressful for the clients that I work with. I don't know if I'm forgetting anything else. I think also like physical health, because I do have clients that are like, they're in that red zone, they're predisposed, the conditions that they have, they're really high risk for COVID. So there's concern like going to the grocery store to get food. And to be honest with my clients, you just cannot just hop in their car and go to the grocery store. They have to take the bus. So that's an increased risk and stuff that they think about and they worry about when I talk to them. So that's one of the challenges that my clients are dealing with.
Thank you so much. Yeah, access to technology and food security is definitely something that a lot of us take for advantage. Thank you, Janelle. And Jesse, would you like to comment?
Sure. Going back to the point about like landlords making stuff up so they can put people out, I just want to agree and say that that is not an isolated incident. We know that landlords have threatened to call ICE. Landlords are making up all sorts of stuff to put people out. And how is that possible? How can we allow that to happen at the same time we're saying that housing is a human right? I think COVID-19 has shown us and reminded us of things that we long know to be true, right? COVID, like homelessness, is primarily impacting Black and Brown people. And COVID has also shown us that housing, until we get a vaccine, is the best way to stay safe. And for 7,000 people in the city, 85% of whom are Black, that's not an option. So I could talk about this forever, but we're actually having a panel tomorrow night, and I'm happy to put the link in the chat. And it's really going to look at, it's both national experts and local experts who are going to be talking about the connections between homelessness, COVID, white supremacy, and the eviction crisis. But some of the things that I'm thinking about are, we're about to go into winter. It is hypothermia season. Normally DC is able to stand up shelters. How do you do that when you have to practice social distancing? Right now, there are no options. Normally during the day, people will go to libraries or cafes. They're all closed. So I don't know what people are going to do during the daytime. So we're seeing just all of these crises compounding on top of each other, and we don't really have a solution for it. And the people who are going to be left to suffer are the people we're talking about, are the people who are living outside. So we have a tremendous amount of work to do. As I mentioned, I work primarily pushing the mayor and the council to use their budgets as moral documents to invest in housing. We're hearing that due to the economic impact of COVID, there are going to be significant cuts to the human services cluster, significant cuts. So we're gonna have to push the city and stand very firm on our belief that, especially during a pandemic, you shouldn't be cutting healthcare, you shouldn't be cutting housing, you shouldn't be cutting these vital human services. And every year we go to the council and to the mayor with ideas about where to find money, right? We do believe that DC has money. So we've asked for a marginal tax increase on our wealthiest residents and have been told no. We've asked for cuts to MPD to reinvest that money into community safety. The council they added money to MPD. So we're gonna need everyone's help because we have so much work to do, and the only way we're gonna do it is by working together and pushing the council to really invest in our values. And to me, and I hope to folks on this call, that means those values are that everyone should have a safe and stable place to call home.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jesse. I would like to ask now, is there anyone in the audience who has like any quick questions? Oh, Jesse, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that link. Everyone, the information to the forum Jesse was talking about is in the chat, so please check that out. And if there's no additional questions, then I will, oh yeah, go ahead.
So this is kind of directed to Tuan because you started to mention earlier how sometimes these families, the families we work with, just need a second chance. So how would you say, how does eviction affect the housing market, and how does it affect those families like trying to get a second chance? Because you were saying like landlords sometimes don't want to work with like clients who use HUD.
Hi, is it Angelica?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Angelica. So, good question. And I am actually glad that you asked that question. So, with the second chance, the clients who we work with, but mostly all of them need a second chance, right? Because if they didn't, they wouldn't be in the programs that they're in. Secondly, with them having the barriers that they do have, it is really hard to get landlords to open up to those clients because they want to what charge $40, $50 for an application fee, say that they're running through a system that we're not even sure that they're running these through. We're not sure if the landlords are just pocketing the money and just saying, hey, the client didn't qualify for the unit. But we do have some landlords who I know for sure are running these reports through the system. And if I've been homeless for 2 years, I don't have a job, or my credit, I may have a 365 credit score. Your criteria is a 680, 520. I'm not going to qualify. So that right there, that barrier affects that second chance, where the landlords are saying, well, we lowered our credit score criteria, but we also still know that, again, for these people that are in the program, they're just not going to have that credit score. And then secondly, we have the landlords who will give a second chance, but what's happening? These units are ending up in Southeast. So what we're doing is the landlords, they're, buying these buildings, they go dust the buildings off a little bit because we do have our slumlords. They dust the buildings off a little bit or whatever to make them pass the HQS inspection. So as long as they pass that housing quality standard inspection, then, the unit is habitable, sanitary, and livable, right? So clients are moving into these units, and because they don't qualify for the units that we have in Northeast, Northwest, our North, Southwest area. So what is happening is with the homelessness, we are dumping all of our clients basically in the Southeast area. And if you think about it, we do have crime all over DC in the 4 quadrants. But if you look at the stats, we're going to have the most crime in the Southeast area. And if you also look at the stats, we're going to have most of our homeless clients located in the Southeast area.
And this is new. This is redlining.
Absolutely.
This is a new form of redlining. And the council, before it has legislation that would make all of these forms of voucher discrimination illegal, it's called the Fair Tenant Screening Act. And hopefully they'll vote on it soon, but who knows?
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you, Angelica, for your question.
I'm sorry, Jesse, can you tell me what that act is called again?
Sure, it's called the Fair Tenant Screening Act. And
Sure.
we can also chat offline about it if that's helpful.
Okay.
Awesome. Gemma, I see your question. We also have a couple more. Megan, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, I was really struck when people were talking about landlords simply making things up. I've taken a class where we mentioned landlord-tenant law, and so I was curious almost, what do you do in these instances? But further, do people even know what to do when a landlord is lying about their situations? And how do we, I guess, inform people of that?
I would say OHR is a good start. I personally haven't run into that situation, but Office of Human Rights for DC, maybe landlord tenant advocacy on 14th and U. I want to say that's the name. I think those will be great starts. I haven't personally experienced it, but just in in my readings, just reading about it, and it makes you ill, especially having a knack for doing what we do, and having a heart for our homeless community. You know, it just makes you ill when you read these articles.
I think another that I've used with my clients is the Equal Rights Center, but it has to be around like discrimination, different civil rights that landlords sometimes deny clients. That's one agency I use as well, but the Office of Tenancy Advocate, they're pretty good with advocating on our clients' behalf.
And they're really sneaky, right? The landlords know they can't say, hey, we're going to evict you tomorrow. So they do these things like, oh, sorry, we cut off your water for a month. My bad. Or we cut off your sewage. Or we're not going to repair your heat. So there's also like, I'm forgetting the word, but it's pretty much eviction through neglect, where they just cut off things or refuse to make necessary repairs. But think about like if you're in the shoes of, yeah, maybe you're undocumented and your landlord has said, I'm going to call ICE if you don't leave. You're not going to go to a government source to say like, hey, I'm really worried my landlord's going to call ICE. You're going to move. And that makes sense. I can appreciate that. Why would you want to stay in a dangerous situation when your landlord has threatened to call the police or ICE or what have you? So there's a lot of talk about like right to counsel and making it so that every person who's facing eviction has legal representation, which I think makes a lot of sense. And also for a lot of people that they're gonna move anyway. So like the die has almost been cast once the landlord has threatened to do that. I'd encourage everyone, if you haven't already, to read the book by Matthew Desmond called Evicted, which looks at, specifically in Minneapolis, but follows both landlords and tenants through the process of eviction. It's phenomenal. It's really worth reading.
Thank you all so much for chiming in on that question. We have a couple more questions. Sarah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I was just wondering, as an AU student, you know, AU is a predominantly white institution, and we are a group of students who are really being trained to kind of go into these higher paying, hopefully, jobs and things like that. I mean, in my eyes, it's kind of hard to understand, like, it's hard to be a student and live, but I mean, it's nothing compared to having chronic housing instability and experiencing homelessness. And so what are ways that like AU students or students in general can utilize their position and the access to institutional power that they have to advocate for people experiencing homelessness?
Anyone can feel free to chime in on that if you have any
Hi.
thoughts.
This is Colleen from Housing Up. So Sarah, thank you for that, because I think what is needed are more individuals from American University and other colleges in the city who have a deep concern about homelessness, and especially how COVID is impacting all of our families who are on the fringes and the marginalized. I know you probably don't have a lot of spare time, but the best way is to volunteer at Legal Aid, volunteer at Housing Up, volunteer at Martha's Table, so that you're actually on the ground and have that experience so that you can actually speak to what is real, and then take that experience and put it into action, whether you decide to do public policy or go to law school or become a social worker. I think I just would encourage everyone to have that on the ground, real experience.
And I'll add, like, I'm always happy to chat offline if you want to talk specifically about how, like, white folks with access to institutional power, wealth, and privilege can do this work. That's something that I think about a lot. But one specific thing is, like, AU has a lot of empty dorms right now. There are a lot of people who don't have places to sleep right now. We've had no luck getting the city to use university dorms. As we approach hypothermia, that's something we're going to keep pushing on, but that call really needs to come from the university students themselves.
Thank you so much. That was a really great question, Sarah. I also had never thought about the university dorms just not being used right now. And we have another question from Heather. Go ahead.
Hi, I really appreciate everything that you guys are sharing. We used to live in Baltimore, and I worked in the inner city schools in Baltimore City, and now I work in the inner city in Dayton, Ohio. And I like what Colleen just said for Sarah about being involved. My husband is a pastor, and a lot of times the experiences that I have in school and what I learn and what I see when I'm working with my students and the families, I'm able to share to him, and I can get back into the church where sometimes they're unaware. And I feel like awareness is a huge part of this. I feel like a lot of times we just don't know enough to vote or to make decisions or get involved. I'm just curious though about your organization itself. I mean, how large is it? How many employees and how many, I think you said at the beginning, but if you can again, maybe say how many people that you are serving in the community. I'm just interested in how you guys work as size-wise and scope.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Heather, for your question about housing up. We are going to go over that specifically after the audience Q&A. So thank you for asking that question. We're definitely going to get to it. Thanks.
Yasmina, I'd just like to point out that we have our CEO as participating in this video as well, Phil Hecht.
Oh, okay.
He's muted, and so we're fortunate to have him available, and he can speak to housing up and the 30 plus years that we've been working in the district.
Totally. Phil, if you would like to chime in now, that would be great. We can also hold off for a few minutes, whatever you prefer.
You're on mute, Phil.
It looks like he is still on mute. Maybe
I'll text him on the side.
Okay, awesome. We will definitely come back to that question. But for now, we have a slide prepared about what actions we can take to help the situation. Gemma, you asked earlier about that question, so we are getting to that now. John, would you mind pulling up that slide, please?
I just, screen sharing is disabled right now from the host. I don't know if that can be switched real quick.
Ooh. Okay. John, you should be able, yeah, okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, so here is our call to action, kind of about what we can do to support ending homelessness in DC. The first one, support advocacy campaigns. We can volunteer at homeless services and organizations that's kind of been mentioned already. We can create drives for specific issues in underserved communities. So gathering resources, food, things like that. We can further our education of the situation facing the city. So it was mentioned how there's sometimes a lack of awareness about these issues or the policies that are like shaping and impacting these issues. And lastly, we can treat those experiencing homelessness with care and compassion. This is important in the language we use talking about the impact of homelessness. And I would like to ask, are there any other suggestions from panelists or anyone at Housing Up? You can definitely chime in now if you'd like.
This is Phil Hecht, and I'm sorry, I was on mute, and also my video was, I'm going to put myself on the video, I hope, in a minute. But can you hear me, Yasmin?
Yes, thank you so much for joining
Well,
us.
I just had to take a phone call, but so I'm not sure I heard the question.
Oh, the question was from, I believe, Heather. She was asking a little bit about like how Housing Up operates, how many people are employed or volunteering, how many people serve the organization or are served by the organization.
Well, again, I appreciate the opportunity, and I appreciated Tuan's and Janelle's participation in this panel. Housing Up has been around for about 30 years, and we have, I am going to try to put myself on video if I can. Just one second. Yeah, there it is. Okay, here I am. We've been around for 30 years. We currently serve more than 700 households in the District of Columbia. Most of them are families. Some are individuals and veterans. But we have a number of programs, one of which Tuan referred to, the Rapid Rehousing Program. But we also do permanent supportive housing, which is pretty much what it says. Permanent housing for people who need support by way of case management or other healthcare providers. We have 90 employees right now, and we are also a developer of affordable housing units. So we have over 500 units right now. We are hoping in the future to take up the cause that Jesse has talked about more affordable housing for people who are in the lowest rungs of the income ladder. We typically serve families who are at 30% of the area median income or below. And we intend to keep doing that. So that's just a thumbnail sketch of Housing Up. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to tell people that.
Thank you so much for that explanation, for being here. And yeah, do any of our panelists have any suggestions or things they would want to add to like the actions that we can take? If not, I am going to turn it back over to John for our closing remarks.
All right. Thank you so much, Yasmina, for moderating this event this evening. On behalf of American University and Housing Up, thank you all again. Thank you our panelists and all those who joined us this evening. We appreciate your work and support important mission of working to end homelessness in DC. And now I would like to hand it back over to Dylan FICA from Housing Up.
Hey everyone, thanks again for joining us. As Phil mentioned, if you're unfamiliar with Housing Up, we are a nonprofit affordable housing developer here in the city of DC. We also provide a wide range of case management services across several different housing programs. We are absolutely honored and thrilled to be working with partners like American University and Miriam's Kitchen. A lot of what we do is bringing together the coalition effort here to work to end homelessness. I've shared the website, www.housingup.org, in the chat. If you're looking to get directly involved with Housing Up, I would highly encourage you to visit that website. We have information about volunteering. We're also kicking off a holiday gift drive if you're interested in sending some holiday joy to one of the families here at Housing Up. I hope everyone has a great evening. We'll stick around if there's any additional questions, but if not, thank you again for joining us.
Thanks so much, Tuan and Jesse and Janelle, and also Phil. And thanks everyone for attending. We will be on for a few more minutes.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Hi, I do have a question. I was in and out. I wasn't able to get in on the Q&As. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I know you guys mentioned that, of course, income is one of the biggest reasons for homelessness, and you have a lot of programs. So do you, I guess, place people in any jobs, or is that one of the programs that Housing Up provides?
Thank you so much for your question. So a big part of what we do is trying to get folks back onto their feet with economic stability. Like Jesse mentioned earlier, the main priority of Housing Up is a housing first model. We want to make sure folks have a unit of housing before anything else. But as soon as we get them stable in housing, the next challenge is how do we maintain that housing? And so employment is certainly at the very top of our list. Depending on the program that you're entered into, there's different expectations in terms of timeline, but getting a job is absolutely essential. We do provide housing for folks that live with disabilities. That's called permanent supportive housing. So sometimes they have additional barriers into maintaining housing, and so work expectations are modified depending on the severity of their disability or situation. But by all means, to maintain housing, we are certainly looking to get folks employment so they can also maintain their independence.
Right. Great.
And if I could jump in, this is a question we get a lot, and I think it's really important to underscore that DC is so wildly unaffordable that even if you have a job, it's still hard to live here, right?
Oh, I know.
Yeah, like people making minimum wage would have to work 80 to 100 hours. So the government needs to step up and fund this stuff, and it's just too expensive, and the government has to fix that.
It really is. I was asking because I'm actually in the middle of starting a small staffing agency where we will help individuals who earn below poverty level or at risk at becoming homeless. So I definitely would like to connect and talk further about that and how I can help personally.
I would love to connect with you. I'm going to share my email here in the chat for you. If you wouldn't mind sending me a following up email. And then I can also share it to our panelists too, so we can get them involved. And just to add one thing to what Jesse said, Department of Housing and Urban Development has determined that anybody paying more than 29% of their monthly salary to rent is considered cost burden. In DC, 70% of residents are cost burden. So as much high collar and technical skill jobs there are in your DC, even in this city, 70% of folks are cost burdened.
I think Rachel also had one last quick question. Rachel, you can go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I was just wondering what measures like DC already takes to protect those at risk of eviction.
Anyone can feel free to answer. Jesse, if you have any thoughts, or Dylan, or Phil.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to kind of maybe answer two different ways. One is like in a pre-COVID world, there was still an eviction crisis in DC, and people are getting evicted right and left. DC has a few funds such as the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, or ERAP, which is the most widely accessed tool to help people be able to pay back rent or whatever is needed to stave off eviction. Every year, that fund runs out of money. So that was a great need before COVID, and now that COVID is a reality, well, there is an eviction moratorium now. At some point, the public health emergency is going to end, I hope. And I think we all hope that that's soon so we can get back to seeing our family and friends. But 60 days after the public health emergency ends, landlords will be able to evict people again. So that means that people who have been unemployed for the past 8 months, who have not been able to pay 8 months, 9 months rent, all of a sudden are going to have to be able to pay all of their rent at once if their landlords are unwilling to come up with a payment plan. And that's just not feasible. So, I mean, we firmly believe the government, both at the DC and federal level, needs to be doing much more to invest in like wholesale rent forgiveness. It's just unrealistic that people who have been out of work for 8 months from low or moderate paying jobs are going to be able to pay 8 months of back rent. It's just not going to happen. And it's expensive. It's going to cost money. But governments can find out how to raise money when they want to. I think when we look at the US government, right, we know that for the cost of one aircraft carrier, we could end homelessness in the country. It's not like these things are magic. We just have to fundamentally reprioritize who we care about and how we spend our money.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for answering the question.
Awesome. I don't believe there are any more questions, but again, thank you all so much for joining and being here tonight. Thank you, Jesse, for staying after and like continuing to answer questions, and Dylan. Yeah, thanks for being here tonight, everyone.
Have a great night, y'all.
Have a great night.